So in this video, we're going to look at how we can calculate commissions, sales commissions, but do so in a way that reflects the realities of a more complex organization. We can very easily Google for how to calculate banded commission or tiered commission, but most of the results that we'll get back will be fairly simplistic Excel formulas that allow you to apply banded commission to a single number. And in a lot of organizations, that is the simplest and tiniest part of the problem to solve. I've worked through quite a number of projects around sales commissions in the past, and from bitter experience, there are quite a few pitfalls and there are quite a few complexities that aren't necessarily immediately obvious when you come into the project. It's really important when we look at this to understand the problem that we're solving, and that actually this isn't generally a single problem that we're solving. We're usually solving 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 or 6 different problems that all relate to commissions, but they're distinctly separate kind of components in their own right. And we need to treat them as such. They have their own distinct requirements, their own distinct constraints. And actually, when we start to analyze them a little bit more, we can see that they tend to have their own processes. And if we approach them as such, if we approach them as individual processes, individual components, we can start to look at how we can make use of their outputs across different reporting projects. Sales commissions, in this case, is one. The flip side of that, really, is if we treat sales commissions as one big problem to solve, which is not uncommon. What we find happens is ultimately it's very easy for it to turn into what I would describe as a big ball of mud. We take in all sorts of different requirements. An example would be identifying the rules that describe new business. And we need to know that because it's very likely that the way that we'll pay commission as an organization on new business will be different to the way that we pay commission on an upsell or a downsell, for example. But it's not only sales commissions that need to know about new business, and it's not necessarily sales commission that should define what new business is. That's potentially a shared concept across the business that can support sales forecasting, churn modeling. There's a whole range of different things that something seemingly as simple as new business can support. So the consequences of looking at sales commission as a single requirement means that we can end up building or rebuilding multiple versions of the same processes. And what that ultimately means is, as an organization, we end up with multiple versions of the truth. And that's something that we would ideally like to avoid. So then we need to move into looking at what these components actually are. We need to break this process of sales commissions down a little bit and work through what some of those components might be. How would we decompose this problem into its component parts? Now, we've already touched on one of those, which is sales levers or sales drivers: new business, upsell, downsell, cancellation. There may well be other sales levers in your business, like for like sales or a renewal, some flavor of renewal there. You might have win-backs. There's a variety of different sales drivers or sales levers that might be present, but they have their own distinct definitions, which aren't really driven by sales commission. Sales commission is in part driven by them. If there was a cancellation, that may or may not impact the sales commission delivered to any one salesperson or any one team. So there's a component there that's got its own kind of life cycle. It's got its own set of rules that are independent of sales commission, but our sales commission is entirely dependent on those rules, and they can be reused. Those concepts can be reused by other reporting processes, other forecasting processes. You know, if we want to do churn modeling, we need to know what a cancellation is. If we want to do sales forecasting or revenue forecasting, well, we probably need to know what all of those sales levers are. So if we tie them completely to sales commission, we either have to go and extract them at some point in the future so we can reuse them, or we'll end up rebuilding them again, and in which case we'll have to keep them synchronized, which takes a lot of time and effort and is quite unnecessary. Or we need them to live in their own component so that they can be shared across the organization and they can have their own life cycle. Another component that we'll typically come across, and this may be referred to as different things in your organization, but is allocations. And this can turn into quite a complex area, or at least conceptually, it can become quite complex. And this refers to how is an account, a customer, a sale, how is that attributed to either an individual salesperson or account manager, the team, and at what point should that customer be handed off between teams? So, for example, if we had a brand new customer that has never interacted with our organization again, it might be that on day one for the first sale, that sale is allocated to someone in the business development team. After 3 months, let's say, it could be 6 months, it could be a month, but after a fixed period of time, that account is handed over from the business development team to the account management team. Now we need to record that, and we need to have a process for allocating that account to the correct team. So immediately there's a set of processes, there's some governance, there's maintenance associated with the transition of customers between teams, between individuals. But then we can start to break that down further, and we can look at, okay, well, what happens if somebody switches teams? Somebody moves from business development into account management, or vice versa. What happens if someone leaves the organization? How is that account allocated? Is it someone else in the team? Is it the team as a whole? And that's a really important and distinct process that it will have an impact and a direct impact on commissions, but it is not commission in its entirety. Sales commission needs to take in sales drivers or levers, and it also needs to take in allocations. But there are all sorts of modeling processes that we might want to do that use allocations, where we might want to say, what will our revenue forecasting look like this year if we were to take the makeup of our teams as it looked at the beginning of the year, versus if we were to switch our teams around, if we were to reorganize because we feel that there may be some strategic advantage to our business to reorganize how our sales teams are engaging with customers. And we might want to do some what-if analysis to say, okay, well, what will that look like? Our allocations then have utility that is way beyond just sales commissions. And again, as a life cycle and as a fundamental data set within our organization, allocations become really important and a very distinct subcomponent, if you like. Well, sorry, not a subcomponent. They become a distinct component of our organization in their own right. So separate to that, we can also then look at sales performance. And again, sales performance as being distinctly separate from commission calculation. What's been sold and what commission schedule should it be attached to? So, for example, a customer in a single day or a single week or a single month, a customer might have added one product or a series of products, but then they may well have cancelled a number of other products. Now, they could all be within a single product group. And if we were to look at this as individual transactions, you might say, upsell, downsell. But if you consider them all within a product group, if that's what you need to do, you might say, actually, by the time they got to the end of the month, there's been no change. They've moved some products around, but the amount of money they were spending at the beginning of the month is the same as it was at the end of the month. And it's not to say that you shouldn't pay commission on that, or you should pay commission on that, but it's a distinctly separate calculation to say what activity has happened with this customer over the course of this particular period, day, week, month, quarter, year, and what are we going to do about it? How are we going to categorize that activity? And so then one of the ways that we can do that is by saying, what commission schedule should it belong to? Because if we take a little step back and go back to our Googling for calculating sales commission, we can very easily get a formula that describes, here's a table of commission bands, and here's a number, what's the commission that should pop out the end of it? That's quite easy. It's relatively trivial to do. But in an organization where, we might have hundreds or possibly thousands of different products, hundreds of different product groups, from a commercial strategy perspective, we might be looking at prioritizing and trying to incentivize sales of specific products and reduce the incentives associated with some other products. So for each of those things, we may well need individual commission schedules. And so that process of attaching the schedule to the sale, it may seem like it's intrinsically linked to the calculation of commission, and it is a very important part of it, but it's also dependent on allocations and sales levers as well. So if we treat that as an individual component, we're reducing the scope of what we need to consider when we're describing how this component works. And the less we need to describe about it, the easier it is for us to describe it. The point of that is, at some point, you're probably going to need to go to an engineer or some sort of engineering discipline. You're going to need to get this built. And the clearer you can be about the components that are involved, and the clearer you can be in your descriptions, and first of all, the easier it is for you to define what good looks like. A definition of done, a definition of success. You will have finished when sales performance can take this input data and produce this number out of the end of it for these reasons. So being able to do that in a very kind of concise fashion is enormously valuable. And it's one thing that will really help make sure that the outputs that you get from any engineering team to do this work for you will be successful. You're increasing your chances significantly of being able to get a successful delivery. So then finally, I would say, and then there may be other components that are relevant for your organization that I'm not touching on here. And it may well be that some of these components are not relevant to your organization. But I would say the piece that comes then right at the end is the calculation of commission. You've got everything classified, it's been categorized, it's been attributed and allocated. So this one sale that happened, we know who it should be assigned to. We know what kind of sale or what kind of activity does it represent, what kind of driver is there. We know what commission schedule it should be using. So now we've got all of those things, and we can now go and do the calculation. It should be effectively a very simple lookup with some quite straightforward arithmetic. So by breaking it down in those ways, we've now got a distinct set of components which are reusable, testable, and the probability of us getting a successful delivery has increased significantly. So we've gone over the conceptual side of this and looked at how we will break this problem down. And that's really step one in the process. And it's about setting up the foundation so that we can then move on to the subsequent steps, knowing that we've got a really solid foundation to base our future work on. And for that, we've got a series of videos to go through the next components and how you will calculate commissions. And along the way, we'll look at how each of those components that we've identified integrate into that commission calculation.